Yo, guys, we're talking about the existence of dragons itself, and I 100% wholeheartedly believe that dragons were here. And every time someone talks about a dinosaur bone, they're actually talking about dragons. So it's like, and this is like intentionally done, hide the existence of dragon, so they don't want us to know about the medieval world. So let's just take a look into it. Not just the medieval world, the biblical theology itself. They don't want us to prove that it's actually, there's some kind of truth in it.
From around the world and all throughout recorded history. Legends are rooted in reality. What if dragon legends were actually based on something real? I was in Plymouth with my family not too long ago, and I got to see Plymouth Rock. It was smaller than I expected, but still cool. And we found a little gift shop right near Plymouth Rock. And inside of that gift shop, I found this little book called Sea Serpents of Coastal New England. And it was part of the New England Folklore series, is what they called it. But none of the accounts in this little book read like fiction.
Not just dragons, like sea serpents, leviathans, like griffins and mermaids. A lot of like medieval shit, like those kinds of obvious things actually existed. Unicorns and shit, like they existed, and for some reason, our mainstream history doesn't want us to know about it.
They're all written like eyewitness accounts of things that actually happened with original published dates and times and everything. And some of the stories sound kind of like maybe a giant eel or a sea snake, but there are a couple that sound like something else. So let's read a couple of these. I used to laugh when they talked about sea serpents, but when I saw this one, I was convinced. He was at least 60 feet long, and he had fins 5 to 6 feet high out of the water. I saw him for about 5 minutes while I was hauling. And then this story. They were surprised when a large animal thrust its turtle-shaped head about 6 to 8 feet out of the water, remaining 5 to 10 seconds, and then went down. This continued for a matter of 2 hours, which it was chased and shot at with a Ballard rifle. The distance at which it was observed ranged from 40 to 160 yards. The color was black, whitish beneath. No scales were noted. The diameter of the neck was about 1.5 feet, while at the water it seemed to broaden with the appearance of flippers. So that's that count. He said it happened in 1939. You might know some people who were alive in 1939. That's crazy. What do we make of this, right? One of my favorite movies is How to Train a Dragon. And the animated series was so successful that they've already made a live-action remake. The grand total of franchise box office earnings for How to Train a Dragon is $2.2 billion, not counting merchandise sales. So very popular, right? So popular that they're now opening the Isle of Berk at Universal Orlando. So you can go and see dragons and see the island of Berk. But our culture today is fascinated by dragons, right? We're obsessed with them. They're mysterious, intriguing, dangerous.
Yeah, in like every movie, like movies like subliminal programming, like
Ginormous. They capture our imagination like few creatures can. They're incorporated into many of our favorite stories. Maybe one of your favorite stories is up there. And it's not just modern stories that dragons are part of. Ancient
it's also like predictive programming, like everything Game of Thrones, everything has some kind of like a dragon figure in it, because these kinds of things actually existed.
dragon legends keep coming up too. Joe Rogan is an infamous podcaster, and he went viral on an episode where he talked about dragons. And here's what he
Yeah, I'll
said.
play the clip.
The fact that we know that pterodactyls did exist, that's cool.
Right.
It would be way cooler if they existed with people.
Right, 2,000 years ago.
Why is that? Why is that so much cooler to us?
I don't know.
Shortly thereafter, he updated his ex-Twitter profile to say Dragon Believer. Later on, he clarified that in a follow-up episode where he said this.
My position is it's probably crocodiles or some big Komodo dragon or some big lizard that did
Oh my god, Joe Rogan always backtracks on his positions.
kill people.
First one.
Is he an op? Like,
And so people fought them with swords and they came back with a story and then the artist drew it.
All right, so his claim is that they were crocodiles or giant lizards or something like that. Well, how big do some of those animals get?
yo, every day passes by to make me believe that Joe Rogan is like a paid op.
Well, let's look at some of those animals life-size on the screen. So this is a Komodo dragon. This is the largest lizard in the world, named after a dragon, ironically. This is how big crocodiles can get today, the largest crocodile, about 20 feet long. But if we look at extinct animals, they got even bigger. This is Megalania, the largest monitor lizard ever found. And this is Sarcosuchus, a crocodile that got 30 feet long. And if we look at snakes, they get pretty large too. So today, the record snake is a reticulated python at around 32, 33 feet long, but extinct snakes got even bigger. This is Titanoboa, 49 feet long. I hope you don't find that in your backyard. So I think these might explain some of the dragon legends we have. But Joe Rogan asks an important question.
Now, are there any stories of dragons like written like in the times of people that they actually had the written word, or is it just depictions?
I don't know. Not my field.
Not my field. Have you ever thought, wow, there's a lot that I don't know, right? We think we know a lot. There's so much information we don't know. Joe Rogan asked a really good question, though. Are there written accounts of dragons? Turns out there are. There are hundreds of dragon legends from around the world.
Yeah, in medieval times they always spot a dragon, like the 13 like Chinese zodiac has dragon as one of its animals. Like there's like thousands of accounts for dragons and shit.
And all throughout recorded history, people use this word dragon and variations of it. And many of them have similar characteristics and descriptions. What are the chances of that happening by accident? For example, the Chinese zodiac. Now, I'm not a proponent of astrology, but it's really interesting that the Chinese zodiac has 11 animals that are real, and then the 12th one is a dragon. Isn't that crazy? It's almost like
Bro, this rabbit hole gets deeper.
those people that made this believed that that animal was just as real as the other 11. Why would they use one mythological beast? And we know it wasn't based on a giant snake because a snake is also in the zodiac. There are other ancient dragon legends too. Way back in 340 BC, Aristotle talked about dragons as if they were real creatures being observed. He said, "The dragon, when it eats fruit, swallows endive juice. It has been seen in the act." Again, this isn't like telling a fairy tale. It's like somebody observed this. Even as recent as 1902, the idea of dragons and sea serpents was seen as credible. Encyclopedia Britannica. Anybody remember Encyclopedia? Anybody read one of those? The 1902 edition, the entry for dragon, said this: "There is still a residuum sufficient to prevent modern zoologists from denying the possibility that some such creature may after all exist." So even as early as 1902, in a reputable publication, they were saying, yeah, it's possible, maybe it existed. But by 1910, the entry had been changed to just say dragons were all myths. So it's only in the past 100 years or so that idea has been prominent. So as I was saying,
Yeah, because, the Rockefellers are in charge of information. Like, they don't want us to know about the old world. For some reason that threatens their whole entire history, our mainstream history itself.
this is Draco, the dragon. You need to go sit down. No, it's not your turn yet. Yes, go sit down. Go back.
Bro, what the fuck is this?
Draco the dragon, ladies and gentlemen, give him a hand. He gets excited when I talk about his friends. Now, I need you guys to do me a favor. I need you to help me out and keep an eye on him, because he can cause trouble sometimes, okay? So if he starts doing something, you need to tell me. Legends are rooted in reality. What if dragon legends were actually based on something real? Let's talk about dodo birds for a minute.
There goes our last female.
You guys have probably seen and heard of dodo birds before. Dodo birds, for a long time, people didn't believe that the dodo bird existed. They thought it was just a legend. For about 100 years, people thought that the dodo bird was a myth until 1800, when a skeleton was discovered. Because they went extinct, people thought they were a myth, but they discovered a skeleton, and they discovered that the legend was true. Legends are rooted in reality. It was assumed to be a myth for over 150 years. Now check this out. Just like the dodo bird, all of these creatures were at one time thought to be mythological legends. And then decades or even centuries later, they were found and scientifically documented. Most of these animals were confirmed to be real only in the last 1 to 200 years. It's very recent. Now you might say, that doesn't happen anymore, does it? Actually, it does. This is the Asian antelope. It's named a Saola. And they didn't actually find one alive until 1996.
Where did we get the dragon
It went extinct
part?
a few years later, sadly. But it was another legend that was rooted in reality. The giant squid, this huge creature. It was one of my favorites as a kid. I love the giant squid. It's very fascinating. But they didn't get live video footage of a giant squid until 2012 off the coast of Japan. And for the first time in U.S. waters in 2019. So there's so much we don't know. But as humans, we get arrogant, don't we? We think we know a lot. We think we have the world all figured out. But there's so much we don't know. Now this shows the estimated size of the biggest squid we've ever measured, around 43 feet long. But there were probably even bigger ones. Maybe that's what sailors call the kraken. Something like that. So these creatures had eyewitness sightings, and even some written records, but they were assumed to be myths for centuries until recently confirmed by scientists. What if, thought experiment here, what if one of
Every time they talk about a myth, it's probably true. You know, the stories of St. George slaying a dragon. These kinds of stories were actually true, and they consider it as myth because it goes against our mainstream history, and they don't want us to find about it.
these creatures went extinct before we found them? They would stay a myth, wouldn't they? Giant pandas or manatees or some of these others might have easily been classified as a myth, and we would have never known differently. Dozens of species go extinct every decade. How many creatures have gone extinct before today and were never discovered as from science? We have thousands of years of eyewitness testimonies and written records talking about dragons as real creatures from all over the world. Dragons weren't considered mythological creatures until the 1900s. Did you know that dragons were mentioned in the Bible? Raise your hand if you knew that dragons were mentioned in the Bible. Now, some of these mentions appear to be symbolic, but some appear to refer to real creatures. We'll talk more about dragons in the Bible and some other dragon accounts in a few minutes. Now, many of the dragon legends, as I said, use similar language to describe these creatures. Land dragons, sea dragons, winged dragons, reptilian with scales, giant teeth, flaring nostrils, big spikes and horns, frills and spines. In a couple minutes, we're going to dive into a few of these specifically that we think have eyewitness accounts of some of these dragons. Now, you might be thinking, okay, dragons being real, that still sounds pretty far-fetched, doesn't it? I mean, if there was any credibility to the idea of dragons being real, there'd be some scientific evidence, like bones or remains or something. Well, believe it or not, we have found physical evidence of every one of these dragons that you see on the screen here. We found bones of every one of these dragons. Let me show you what I mean. Now, we have modern words for these animals. We call them dinosaurs, or pterosaurs, pterodactyls, plesiosaurs.
Yeah, I told you, like, it's a deception when they say, like, the reptiles existed before humanity existed 65 million years ago. That's one of the biggest deception ever, bro.
Mosasaurs. But the word dinosaur wasn't invented until the 1800s. All these bones of real creatures that have been found, when you put flesh on these bones, they looked a lot like what we expect dragons to look like, don't they? In fact, scientists even recognize that dinosaurs look like dragons. They look so much like dragons that the scientists often include the word dragon in dinosaur names. So here's a list of a couple dozen dinosaur names that have the word dragon in them. Words like Draco, Darko, Dracon, Asdar, Long, and others that are root word that means dragon.
This makes sense if you actually, study about the history of how they find the first dinosaur bone. It's some wacky shit. Like, make a future video on that.
In other languages. Let's look at one of those dinosaur names. This one is named Draco Rex. It was named after a skull found in Iowa in 2006. Look at that skull. Very dragon looking, isn't it? Very dragon-like with all the horns and spines. And if you add flesh to it, it looks a lot like a dragon. Definitely dragon-like, isn't it? Now, the name means Dragon King of Hogwarts. It's named after the Harry Potter series. And Draco Rex is believed by many to be a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus. This is a guy with a dome-shaped head, and they may have banged their heads together like bighorn sheep do today. It was about 15 feet long. It was actually featured in one of the older Jurassic Park movies. Now check this out. This is a relief etching that was
Like, if you actually believe the concept of dinosaurs, like, with these two fucking short hands, like, they're hunting and, like, come on, bro. Anybody who's smart and with a small sense of common sense, this shit ain't possible. Like, giant reptiles hunting with these two small hands. Come on, bro.
found in a 14th century church in the country of Georgia. It's very dinosaur-like, don't you think? Maybe this represents two dinosaurs butting their heads together. The best explanation that I've seen other researchers have for it, other than a dragon, is a salamander. Doesn't look much like a salamander to me. Now, some of you might be thinking, hold on. Dragon legends can't be from dinosaurs because dinosaurs and people didn't live together.
Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together.
How many of you have heard the idea that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago? Right? We've all heard that idea. It's even in kids' books. Kids can tell you this. You can even watch
That's an op.
kids' television shows like Dinosaur Train.
I bet we've hiked into the Jurassic layer, which is millions of years older than the Cretaceous layer back up there where we started.
So before we dive into any more of these dragon legends, I want to answer the question of millions of years and address that. But let's start with this question. How long would a species have to be extinct or be missing before you know that it's...
The whole it being 4.5 billion years old doesn't even make sense. Things like great unconformity, like if you actually study it like that, there's like a geological records of 1.5 billion geological records actually missing. If you are to believe in the mainstream paradigm of the 4.5 billion, like the great unconformity is one of the biggest evidence that Earth is not 4.5 billion years old.
completely extinct. This furry little guy is a Cuban solenodon, and he was discovered in 1861, presumed to be extinct by 1890, and then later on discovered in 1974 to still be alive. You might say that's totally different. That was only like 84 years, right, that they thought he was extinct. Dinosaurs have been extinct for millions of years, you might say. Well, that's what's really interesting about solenodons. They're actually called living fossils. And they're called that because we've found fossils of these solenodons that are said to have lived 30 million years ago. And this is just one example of a living fossil. Fossils of all of these animals on the screen have been found in the same rock layers as dinosaur bones, and they're also alive today. Now, some of these fossils are the same species as the animals alive today. Others are unique species but look remarkably similar to animals alive today. So this idea of an age of reptiles is looking less and less accurate. Sometimes we think we know a lot about the past, but if you watch the news and pay attention to science headlines, you'll see something like, this discovery changes everything. And you'll see that almost every week. Something is always coming out and changing the storyline. So we don't often know as much as we think we know. A great example of a living fossil is coelacanth, which is a fish. And fossils of this fish were discovered in the 1800s, and a live one was caught in 1938. 1938, supposedly 60 million years after it went extinct. And there were no fossils in between today and those layers. Now, living coelacanths can get to be about 7 feet long, but extinct ones, they could grow to be about 16 feet long. That's a giant fish. These are only a few of the many examples of living fossils. And all of these animals lived with dinosaurs, and many, like the coelacanths, didn't leave any fossil evidence in more recent rock layers. So, how can scientists know for sure which animals actually survived? There's so much we don't know about the past. Isn't it possible that dinosaurs lived longer than most people think? These animals did. Now, I believe
And carbon dating is one of the fakest fucking shit ever.
that dinosaurs and people lived at the same time. And it's not just me. There are a large number of PhD scientists that believe this too. Some of them work here at Answers in Genesis. I want to share some of the things that I've learned from them with you. Living fossils are the first of 5 big reasons why they convinced me that dinosaurs and people lived at the same time. Just because something is found in different rock layers doesn't mean that animal can't be alive today. Number 2 is carbon dating. Now, this might surprise you. I'm going to say carbon dating proves old ages, doesn't it? Actually, carbon dating only dates things up to 50 to 80,000 years old. Anything older than that, and the radiocarbon levels are too low to be detected. So most scientists don't date dinosaur fossils because they assume they won't detect any radiocarbon. But guess what happens when you do date a dinosaur fossil? You find radiocarbon. They're dated to only thousands of years old, not millions. This is a quote from Dr. Andrew Snelling, a geologist. He says, the scientific literature reported carbon-14 in 70 samples that came from fossils, coal, oil, natural gas, and marble, supposedly spanning more than 500 million years, all containing radiocarbon. Diamonds, supposedly 1 to 3 billion years old, similarly yielded radiocarbon. These things are not as old as people think they are. Carbon dating confirms that dinosaurs didn't live millions of years ago.
Yeah, and the mainstream used carbon dating as like a gotcha for everything. That's a excuse for everything. Like carbonating. Carbonating is can't even date back. Things are fucking 100 years. Like it's one of the most corrupt industries ever. Like
Even other radiometric dating methods, when used on rocks of known ages, show much older dates than they should. So it's not a very reliable resource. Number 3, dinosaur fossils have been found with soft tissues inside of them. Most scientists didn't believe this at first, but there's now overwhelming evidence. There are 130 peer-reviewed research papers describing original proteins and biomolecules inside dinosaur bones. A creation scientist from ICR, Institute for Creation Research, named Dr. Brian Thomas, he actually did a whole bunch of study on this. He sequenced the proteins from these dinosaur bones and found that they were original collagen fibers from the dinosaur bones. They weren't like washed in or something like that. It's not possible for tissues like this to last millions of years. Evolutionists don't have an adequate explanation for this. Soft tissue in dinosaur bones confirms that dinosaurs did not live millions of years ago. Number 4 is fossil graveyards. And a great example of this is
it's
dinosaurs.
not just millions of years ago. Like dinosaurs never were, like it's just there were no giant reptiles before humanity itself. Like that's one of the biggest fucking psyop ever.
National monuments in
And they program it using predictive programming on every fucking Jurassic Park movies, bro.
Utah. There's 210,000 acres with fossils embedded all over. And in the Quarry exhibit hall alone, there's over 1,500 fossils visible on the surface from at least 11 different species of dinosaurs. And look at all these bones. They're just all jumbled together. It's hard to even tell what's connected to what. Another example of a mass burial is this guy. This is a Pachyrhinosaurus. He was found in Alberta, Canada. There were over 8,000 bones of Pachyrhinosaurus. They're in the same family as Triceratops. Hundreds of individuals, all buried rapidly together by what scientists say was a flood, interestingly enough. There are hundreds of examples from around the world where fossils of dinosaurs and other animals show evidence of rapid burial. Very different from the story of millions of years and slow fossilization. Turns out fossils form very quickly under the right conditions. Most of these examples show explicit evidence of water. Floods, mudslides, marine creatures. Now, what event in biblical history would make sense of rapid burial of fossils like this? Got any ideas?
Noah's flood.
Noah's flood. The flood of Noah's day. The worldwide flood of Noah's day. All right, so those are my 4 favorite scientific reasons why I believe dinosaurs and humans live together. But I said I was going to share 5 reasons. The 5th reason is the biggest one. It's the best evidence that dinosaurs lived with people. Are you ready? The biggest reason is actually not from science. See, science textbooks, like we just talked about, they change all the time. People make mistakes because there's so much we don't know. Instead of trusting man's word, who doesn't know everything, hasn't always been there, I'd rather trust the words of someone who's always been there,
There's like 1,000 descriptions of dinosaurs in medieval world itself. Like it's kind of crazy.
who knows everything and who never lies. Let's look at God's word. John 1:3 says, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Genesis 1:25 says, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kind, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. So, according to the Bible, God made dinosaurs and other land animals he created on day 6, the same day as Adam and Eve. For the idea of millions of years, it didn't come from the Bible. It was an idea that man created and tried to insert into the Bible. Now, if I take man's ideas and force them into the Bible, that's kind of that arrogance we were talking about, isn't it? It's elevating my words, man's words, above God's words. Let's talk about that, because some people say, yeah, but couldn't God use millions of years to create? Well, there's multiple problems with that. So let's just talk about 2 of them. The way people try to add millions of years to the Bible is in the days of creation, because all the rest of the history you can back up pretty well.
I don't use the Bible, to make like a source of evidence for dinosaurs, source of evidence for dragons, but there's like a multiple records of medieval science and old encyclopedias that confirm that dragons were actually like real creatures that contemporarily existed with humanity.
But the days of creation is where they try to stick it in. They try to make the days longer. They try to insert gaps between them. But the days of creation, at the end of the creation week, God said everything he had made was very good because there was no sin and death yet, right? So if millions of years of rock layers and fossils happened before sin, how could we explain fossils like this? This is a fossil of a velociraptor attacking a protoceratops. The raptor's sickle claws look like they're digging into the protoceratops' neck. The proto has the raptor's arm in its mouth. Did God call bloodshed and violence like this very good? This also had to be buried very quickly to be preserved like this.
Bro, I don't even believe in these fossils and shit. Like, they can make shit up, bro.
It's an amazing preservation. Here's a fossil of thorns. They were found in the Carboniferous layers of rock, and that's earlier in the rock layers than when dinosaurs were found. But according to God's word, thorns and thistles didn't exist until after Adam and Eve sinned. Here's a fossil of a dinosaur leg bone. It is a Centrosaurus, which is in the same family as Triceratops. And you can see that yellow area on the bone. That's cancer. Scientists can study these bones at a molecular level, and they can determine what's happening there. And this dinosaur had cancer. Did God call cancer very good? There's many fossils like this that were buried. If they were buried before Adam and Eve sinned, that creates some serious theological issues. What kind of God would call these things very good? Let's look at the second major problem about adding millions of years to the Bible. Let's read Matthew 19:4. He answered, talking about Jesus, have you not read, he who created them from the beginning made them male and female. Now, evolutionists teach that man has only existed for the last 0.4% of history. So man's way over here in the 0.4% of history, and they teach that there's millions of years of history that came before us, right? Well, Jesus said God made man from the beginning. It brings into question the character of God. It undermines Jesus' very words. Was Jesus lying when he said he made man from the beginning? When you start with the Bible, explaining the world, and even explaining things like dragons, makes much more sense. Let's talk about that. The Bible's history about dinosaurs and dragons can be summarized this way. First, they were formed. Dinosaurs were created during creation week on day 6, the same day as man. During that time, they were fearless because God made everything very good. There was no death, animals didn't eat each other, and that's why we show peaceful dinosaurs in the Garden of Eden at the Creation Museum. They're not killing each other, they're not violent, they're eating plants. Then, man sinned, so they were fallen. Thorns and thistles appeared, dinosaurs became more ferocious, cancer and death entered the world like we talked about earlier. And then there was a flood. The flood of Noah resulted in billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. And most of the dinosaurs were buried in that flood, and that's why we find their fossils today. But 2 of each kind of dinosaur boarded Noah's Ark because they were air-breathing land animals. Now you might think, no way, we've all seen Jurassic Park. Right. There's no way this guy was on Noah's Ark. I mean, a ferocious T-Rex would eat everything on the Ark, right? Well, Tyrannosaurus and other dinosaurs, they were large when they were adults and as they grew, but even this big guy started as an egg that was about 2 feet long. God wouldn't have brought Noah the big old dinosaurs. He would have brought young ones, like this guy. That's a juvenile T-Rex. And if you go to the Ark Encounter, how many of you have been to the Ark Encounter? Or planning on going? Anybody planning on going? Awesome. If you go there, this guy is in a cage on the Ark. Much more manageable size, right? Wouldn't be as ferocious, and much more likely to be able to reproduce after the flood. So there was the flood, and then dinosaurs and dragons, they faded from memory. They probably didn't survive as well as some other animals, obviously, maybe from the different climate after the flood, maybe because different foods were available, or maybe humans killing them off. What are a lot of the dragon legends about? They're about people killing dragons. So they could have easily become extinct that way as well. As these animals became more and more rare, they became more legendary. And that's why we find artwork like this from the Middle Ages. There were legends of these dragons, and maybe some sightings, and people got to see them. Then they were found. These fossils from the flood were found, and in 1841, the word dinosaur was coined by Sir Richard Owen. And it wasn't until that time. Draco, don't burn up my slide.
Yeah, that dude's just high up. If you actually study this Richard Owens dude, like, it's one of the most, like, dubious evidence ever.
You guys are supposed to help me. You're supposed to warn me about Draco. Okay, all right. So, I guess he wants us to talk about him, so we're going to talk about Draco now. You see, Draco is loosely based on some of this artwork from the Middle Ages. And this is one of the big mysteries about dragons, and that is, where did the idea of a 4-legged dragon with 2 wings come from? Some researchers even use that to undermine the idea that dragons were real. They say, we don't find fossils of that. We haven't found a dinosaur or a pterosaur with 4 legs and 2 wings. And so, Draco is going to help us here to solve that mystery. When I started looking into this and digging into these old drawings and paintings, I saw some of these drawings and paintings, and I thought to myself, those wings were way too small to carry one of these dragons. They weren't big enough for actual flight. And then I looked a little closer, and where is that wing coming from on the body? It looks like it's kind of coming from the armpit. It's not like the top of the back or anything like that we would expect. So I was really confused by that. What's going on? And then I remembered something. Now, you guys have probably all seen pterosaurs or pterodactyls like this guy. This is Rhamphorhynchus. And when pterosaurs were first discovered, scientists were trying to figure out how they flew, how they walked, all these different things, because they're very, very crazy-looking animals. At first, they thought they walked out with their wings kind of sprawled out, like in this picture. This picture is actually from an old poster in my office. I got the poster when I was a kid back in the 90s. I was a dinosaur-obsessed kid. Who am I joking? I'm still a dinosaur-obsessed kid. I never really got through that. But funny story, actually. Before I got married, I decorated my apartment with all my dinosaur toys and posters like this one.
Bro, I hate the small talk jokes in between.
And then I got married and brought my wife back to our apartment, and she said, oh no, these dinosaurs are going to work with you. Thankfully, she's very nice, and she let me keep one of them at home. But the rest of them are in my office with this poster. But paleontologists and scientists, they thought, maybe these animals walk like bats, right? Bats don't walk very well. They're kind of like sprawled out with their wings, not very efficient walkers. But then they discovered some footprints of pterosaurs. And so recently, they've updated that research, and it turns out these animals could walk and even run pretty well on all 4 legs. Then, several fossils show that the wing actually folds out really close next to the arm. And in some species, it may have even tucked behind the arm. And if you look at some of these other fossils, you can see that their wing is made of a giant finger that kind of extends out for half the wing. And that finger is pretty stiff when the wing is open, as you would expect, because it needs to support the flight. But when the wing is closed, it becomes more flexible, it seems. And you can see it even looks like it bends backward in some of these fossils. So if we bend the wing slightly, what is this starting to look like? Then we add some soft tissue. We don't know exactly what they had, if they had a lot of scales or frills or anything like that. It's starting to look more and more like a dragon. Draco here is actually based on a pterosaur in the same family as Rhamphorhynchus called Harpactognathus. And the front legs and the wings are actually the same structure. It just opens it when it needs to fly. And then when it closes it, the wing tucks back behind the arm. And it looks like they have wings coming out of their back. When the wings fold, they look very similar to some of these ancient drawings and paintings. This is brand new research that takes the latest fossil evidence combined with some of these dragon legends to give a more complete picture of how these animals may have lived. Now, Rhamphorhynchoids, like Rhamphorhynchus and Harpactognathus, they're actually quite a bit smaller. So, sorry, Draco, you're not quite as big and scary. Although, even at this size, He probably had about an 11-foot wingspan, which is the same size as an Andean condor, one of the largest flying birds today. I would not want to mess with a dragon that size. That's still pretty large. Some pterosaurs grow even larger. This is the famous Pteranodon, very large, and the largest pterosaur was Quetzalcoatlus, and it looks like a giant giraffe dragon or something. It's kind of crazy. Now, Draco helped us with some of the Middle-aged dragon legends, but maybe he can help us explain some of the more ancient dragon legends as well. So this is a quote from Herodotus, a respected historian from around 400 BC. And he wrote about winged serpents. And he said, "I saw bones of serpents and spines in quantity so great that it is impossible to make report of the number. At the beginning of spring, winged serpents from Arabia fly towards Egypt." So what's he talking about there? We don't find fossils of that either. We don't find fossils of a snake.
There's so much evidence of this medieval creatures, the phoenix, all these things, like the description of phoenix in like Clement, one of the church fathers letter, and also like there's multiple like griffins, different medieval creatures and their documentation.
Wings. What does that mean? Well, these pterosaurs had long tails, some of them. And so when the wings were open, if you just saw one in the sky with a long tail, it may have looked like a flying serpent. So it might explain that too. This is a really crazy recent example of this. The Tombstone Epitaph newspaper in Arizona printed the following report in 1809. A strange monster discovered and killed in the Huachuca Desert. A winged monster resembling a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and an immense pair of wings was found in the desert between Whetstone and Huachuca Mountains last Sunday by two ranchers who were returning home. The two men, who were on horseback and armed with Winchester rifles, pursued the monster and succeeded in getting near enough to open fire with their rifles, wounding it. The monster had only 2 feet. The head, as near as they could judge, was about 8 feet long, the jaws being thickly set with strong, sharp teeth. Its eyes were as large as dinner plates and protruded about halfway from the head. The total length from tip to tip was about 160 feet. The wings were comprised of a thick and nearly transparent membrane. Now, we haven't found a long-tailed pterosaur that large yet, so maybe they're exaggerating, or maybe there's one we haven't discovered yet. Hey, everybody say goodbye to Draco. Now, even evolutionists see a lot of the similarities between extinct reptiles and dragon legends. This book, by Adrienne Mayer, was published in 2023, where she says, many of the giants and monsters of myth did have a basis in fact, the enormous bones of long-extinct species. So she tells a whole story about how ancient people near Mongolia, they must have seen some dinosaur bones that got uncovered and then made up legends of the griffin. That same year, though, a researcher came out with this paper, and they were unconvinced. They did a good job discrediting the ideas. They said, interpretations of ancient literary references to griffins as pertaining to Protoceratops.
Griffins are all it existed. You can see the image of griffin on the map of Tartaria itself. That's like another big rabbit hole conspiracy. You can see the griffin on the map of the flag of Tartaria itself.
Are unconvincing, and suggested anatomical similarities between griffins and Protoceratops are selectively identified. So I think you guys should decide for yourself. So let's look at some of the ancient artwork of griffins, okay, from a few different cultures here. And which one of these lines up the best? The Protoceratops bones. This is a 4-legged hoofed animal with no wings, a big thick tail, or something more like a pterosaur that had 4 legs, sharp claws, beak, crest, a tail, large wings folded against the shoulder. Maybe griffin legends started with the pterosaur. All right, so we talked about a few of our dragon legends so far. We only got a little bit of time left. So let's quickly highlight a few more. This dragon is based on Baryonyx. Baryonyx was a 33-foot-long dinosaur with huge claws, long jaws, sharp teeth. Baryonyx also had a long muscular tail. Now
and the funny thing about it's all like dinosaurs are just drawings. Like
Baryonyx was a 33.
This is not real. It's a description someone actually made, like from the bones and stuff. But there's like rarely you ever get like a fully preserved dinosaur fossil. That doesn't happen. These people make descriptions of it.
3-foot-long dinosaur with huge claws, long jaws, sharp teeth. Baryonyx also had a long muscular tail. Now here's an interesting thing. The Aberdeen Bestiary from 1500 AD talks about all sorts of animals, including dragons. Again, dragons along with real animals. And it says, they say it does not need poison to kill things because it kills anything around which it wraps its tail. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was a master of anatomy, drew all kinds of animals. And in one of his drawings, he drew this animal, which looks a lot like a Baryonyx, a lot like a dragon. And you can see it has a coiled tail. So it lines up with some of these other accounts. Now we see this in some living animals today, constrictors like boas and pythons, as well as some lizards, which have a prehensile tail that they can use to grasp things. We also see this behavior in some medieval paintings of George and the Dragon, where you can kind of see the dragon's tail there is wrapping around the horse's leg. So this is an example of a behavior that nobody would know from fossil bones, just finding a skeleton. This is a behavior that somebody observed. What about this fire-breathing business? Talking about behaviors. I mean, that sounds pretty fantastical, right? I mean, animals breathing fire. Well, many animals have behaviors that sound pretty outlandish if you've never seen them before. For example, spitting poison. That's not something you could tell from the fossil, and that sounds pretty crazy. Constricting. We just mentioned that one, right? An animal killing its prey by squeezing them. Electrocution. This one's nuts. If I didn't know about this and you told me that an animal can kill its prey by electrocuting them and not killing itself, I would have said you're crazy. But an electric eel does exactly that. This one is crazy, and recent research has shown that birds have a quantum compass built into their eyes so that they can see north, south, east, and west. Heat vision. Pit vipers can actually see heat. Even in your backyard, you might have experienced something like this, the spray of a skunk, right? Not something that you could tell from the bones or from the fossil. And then my favorite one is the bombardier beetle. This little
It's almost like these kind of creatures have superpowers.
beetle mixes two chemicals in its abdomen to create an incredibly hot spray that it sprays onto its enemies to protect itself. So maybe fire breathing isn't quite as crazy as it sounds. All right, 3 dragons down. Let's keep going. This
Yeah, bioluminescence. Actually, it's just that you think fire breathing sounds crazy.
dragon is Kentrosaurus. Look at the giant spines on the back of that dragon. Very dragon-like. Another medieval bestiary from around 1200 AD says this: the dragon's strength is found in its tail, not in its teeth. Its lashing tail does great harm. I would say that would do that. Yep. Would not want to be on the other end of that tail. And then Pliny the Elder was a prominent Roman author, naturalist, military commander from AD 77. And he said, Africa produces the elephants, but it is India that produces the largest as well as the dragon. So he's talking about elephants and dragons in the same sentence. Now, at that time, Greater India, at the time of Pliny, was a much larger area, including the Ta Prohm Temple in Cambodia. And look at what's engraved in the Ta Prohm Temple alongside some other real animals. That looks a lot like a dinosaur, doesn't it? Anybody know which dinosaur? Happens to be my favorite dinosaur, Stegosaurus, which is about 21 feet long, had tail spikes up to 3 feet long. Looks like some people may have actually seen this animal and carved it into their temple. All right, only 2 left, and these are big ones. This dragon is based on Amargasaurus. It had huge neck spines coming off his neck. They recently found that other sauropods as well, like Diplodocus, this big guy, had spines on their neck as well, and back and tail, and these spines are up to 7 inches long. They also found that sauropods have all different types of scales on them. So this whole idea of like really smooth sauropods might not be very accurate. They may have been way more dragon-like than we realized, probably a lot more like reptiles we see today. And we do find evidence of sauropods living with people. Look at this drawing from Mauritania, West Africa. It's described as a painting of a mythical animal near the cave closely resembling a dinosaur with 2 mounted horses on the left. I'm not sure what else that could be other than a dinosaur. Another example, Bishop Richard Bell died in 1496, and as was the custom at the time, they buried him under the floor of the church in Carlisle, England. And etched on his grave were numerous real animals, along with a dragon, and these look like 2 sauropods with their necks intertwined. It's a little bit hard to see here, but I can't think of what else it would be. Now, the best evidence of dinosaurs living with people is the Bible, because its author has always been here, and he knows everything. In Job 40, starting in verse 15, it says, "Look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar tree. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit." So he moves his tail like a cedar tree. When I was a kid, I remember reading this in my Bible, and I looked at the footnote, and it said that this animal might be a hippo or an elephant. A tail like a cedar tree. That's a cedar tree. And back in that day, in that part of the world, they got even bigger. I don't think that fits. That description is not a very good description. Now let's compare this to the largest sauropod we've ever found. This is Titanosaurus. Look at the size of that tail, and look at the size of that thigh bone. This thing is huge. Giant animal. A creature like this makes way more sense with the biblical account than something like a hippo or an elephant. Another account is found in the very next chapter of Job, Job 41, where it says, "Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils comes forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth." Again, that fire-breathing thing again, right? That was a Mosasaurus, up to 50 feet long. And to show Prehistoric Planet, they commissioned some scientific research to try to figure out how fast could a Mosasaurus swim. According to the research they did, it could swim 30 miles an hour in short bursts. That means it could cover 75% of its body length in 1 second. It's like being hit by a semi-truck. Verse 25 says, "When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. Because of his crashings, they are beside themselves." Many of you are probably familiar with the account of Job in the Bible. He had a horrible trial.
Now I get that why the mainstream is trying to hide this much effort to hide dragons and shit, like 'cause they don't want scripture to be true whatsoever.
Happened in his life. His children were killed. His wife told him to curse God and die. And he responds like I probably would. He questioned God. He asked, "Why, God?" And let's read how God answers Job. In Job 41, it says, "Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, 'Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determines its measurements? Surely you know.'" God basically says, "You think you know so much, don't you, Job?" And we do, don't we? We're arrogant that way. We think we know a lot. But God questioned him. So instead of answering Job's question, God spends 4 chapters proclaiming his works to Job and asking Job questions. And at the end of that, God ends on these 2 enormous creatures we just talked about, Behemoth and Leviathan. And at the end of talking about Behemoth, God says, "He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword." And we finishes talking about Leviathan. He says, "On earth there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride." Try to put yourself in Job's shoes, right? He's facing this really difficult trial, and he questions God like many of us would. But God lays him low. God humbles him. And after that, Job replies, completely humbled. It says, then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. I have heard you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. I want to encourage you guys to read God's word and allow it to
Yeah. Now I know there's like that sense we have for by the mainstream, you know. Get rid of like anything associated with dragons, like, and it's always like dismissal. It's always like it's a myth. Yeah, it's crazy.
More than 4,000 years ago, a scribe in ancient Mesopotamia wrote a curious word on a clay tablet, Uzum Gal. The word is in Sumerian, humanity's oldest written language, and is believed to be the oldest known word for dragon. It's composed of the words Gal, big, and Uzum, snake. Similar to the mystery of pyramids popping up all around the world between cultures who supposedly had no contact with each other, we see the same enigma of cultures far and
Big snake. I think that's something you.
wide, all depicting dragons.
So around the same time period in, China, South America,
Big snake's what I call my down under.
Africa, all these different Rome, all these places, images depicted people fighting dragons, right? And every dragon was slightly different, but it was all a giant scaly animal that could fly.
One of the earliest depictions of dragons or giant second millennium. In the Babylonian version of this story, a serpent deity monster called Tiamat emerged from the sea to threaten all of creation. A young god, Marduk, takes up the challenge, slaying Tiamat and rescuing the people. Large serpent-like creatures that live in the sea is something that's also documented in the Bible.
Yeah, what kind of drugs is this guy on?
In that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. The book of Job chapter 41 documents this Leviathan in great detail. Here's a few verses that really stand out. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights, sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot, and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. St. George and the Dragon is one of the most well-known stories about dragons, and it's very similar to that one mentioned in the Bible. St. George is believed to have lived during the latter part of the 3rd century AD and served as a soldier in the Roman army. The battle with the dragon is as follows. Thus, as
this description is like St. George is out everywhere, and people still choose to believe it's like some kind of a myth. But this story is 100% elaborated on like, and responsible was scripture, multiple like statues of St. George slaying dragons. But our modern explanation thinks it's embellished mythology.
they spake together, the
Which is crazy.
dragon appeared and came running to them. And St. George was upon his horse, and drew out his sword, and garnished him with the sign of the cross, and rode heartily against the dragon which came towards him, and
Damn, that's badass.
smote him with his spear, and hurt him sore, and threw him to the ground. And after said that to the maid, deliver to me your girdle, and bind it around the neck of the dragon, and be not afeared. When she had done so, the dragon followed her as it had been a meek beast and debonair. When it comes to dragons in Chinese culture, their history dates back thousands of years. The Chinese dragon has a long serpentine body that's generally wingless, with an anthropomorphic face and complete with a beard. In ancient China, dragons were considered gods, and the historic symbol dating sometime around 5000 BC became the crest of the Chinese emperor. Only the emperor was allowed to use the dragon as a symbol. When it comes to the Chinese calendar, every animal that's linked to a specific month is an animal that's known to exist. The only one on that list that people claim never existed is the dragon. North America actually has a history linked to dragons as well. America is actually referred to as the land of the plumed serpent, which refers to the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. The god is also known as Kukulclan among the Yucatec Maya and is viewed as the feathered serpent or plumed serpent. But even stranger than that is the legend of the Piasa bird found painted on the cliffsides of the Mississippi River that shares a lot of similarities with dragons. In 1673, Jacques Marquette saw a painting on a limestone bluff overlooking the Mississippi River while exploring the area. He recorded the following description. While skirting some rocks, which by their height and length inspired awe, we saw upon one of them two painted monsters, which at first made us afraid, and upon which the boldest savages—
Yo, imagine you're going on a fishing trip and you see a fucking dragon, like... Go the other way, pal.
dare not long rest their eyes. They are as large as a calf, They have horns on their heads like those of a deer, a horrible look, red eyes, a beard like a tiger's, a face somewhat like a man's, a body covered with scales, and so long a tail that it winds all around the body, passing above the head and going back between the legs, ending in a fish's tail. Green, red, and black are the three colors composing the picture. Moreover, these two monsters are so well painted that we cannot believe that any savage is their author, for good painters in France would find it difficult to reach that place conveniently to paint them.
Yeah, there's multiple like statues, sculptures of dragons and stuff. It's hard to believe these kinds of things are like mythology, as they claim.
Here is approximately the shape of these monsters as we have faithfully copied it. Some people claim to see dragon-like creatures up to this very day. The Loch Ness Monster in Scotland is very similar to the sea serpent accounts that we read in the book of Isaiah and Job. One of the strangest recent claimed dragon sightings was from a SpaceX rocket launch. This video is taken from the SpaceX YouTube channel from a live stream of their rocket going up into space.
Okay, this is stupid, bro. Like, space hits dragon. Come on.
The definition for dragon in the 1946 Webster's Collegiate Dictionary is pretty interesting. The very first definition says now rare, a huge serpent. Second says a fabulous animal, generally a monstrous winged, scaly serpent, lizard, or saurian, which means a large reptile. If dragons did or do still exist, here's one reason as to why no one ever finds their bones in the fossil record.
So when you break that down, you think about the fact that large birds had a hard time being fossilized because their bones are so porous, right? So because bones, they have like hollowish bones, they break down very easily and they don't fossilize. So it's like the science is saying that if there were lizards big enough to fly around and eat people, they didn't have bones that could fossilize.
So it'd be like an eagle.
Right. And that's why all these human populations around the world have depictions of them, because they did actually exist.
Dragons probably don't still exist in the same sense as these ancient accounts, although that SpaceX video is pretty strange, but the Bible does tell us of a different dragon, and I can assure you this one still exists today. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Satan is referred to as the dragon, and he, his angels, and the other evil hosts still exist today. They're probably even connected to these strange sightings of creatures that people are getting glimpses of all around the world. God tells us the fate of this dragon in Revelation 20:1-3. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a little while. When Satan is released, he has one final attempt to try to attack God, his city, and the people who follow him. But this will end very bad for him. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. The connection between cultures who had no human-to-human contact, all depicting this same type of creature, to me prove that something along these lines existed. Whether it still exists today, I would say, if anything, what people are seeing is a breakthrough from the spiritual realm into our own of different types of hellish creatures, and they for certain are connected to the dragon, also known as Satan. But the good news is, unlike in ancient times, where they feared the dragon would come and devour them at any moment, if you believe in Jesus Christ and have made him the Lord of your life, you have someone
I don't think dragons are like hellish creatures. I think they are like physical creatures that actually existed here. Like, I don't think they're from another dimension or anything like that.
The pervasiveness of dragon myths in the folk legends of many cultures is probably no accident. These insightful words
But Carl Sagan said that?
were spoken by the atheistic astronomer Carl Sagan. As Sagan noted, stories of dragon encounters permeate the legends, lore, and histories of every major people group in the world. Ancient Chinese, Native American Indians, early Germanic tribes, South American Nazcans, Greeks, Dogon and Bambara tribes of Mali, Persians, Scandinavians, Babylonians, Ashanti of West Africa, Egyptians, Romans, peoples of ancient India, and many others. How can this be
Yeah,
explained?
with this level of evidence, you think dragons aren't real? Like, come on, bro.
Carl Sagan's strange credulity by suggesting that our
It's time to give the dinosaur grift and believe in dragons.
far distant evolutionary ancestors saw dinosaurs and somehow passed these frightful memories down from generation to generation over the millions of years. But rather than believing in a far-fetched scenario whereby a squirrel-like ancestor passed a vision of dinosaurs to its descendants by some unknown biological mechanism, we can look to the Bible to provide the straightforward truth as we explore the historical era of dragons and men.
Bro. This music's unnecessary.
The Bible explains how God used Noah to save 2 of every kind of land creature that he had made, including the dinosaurs. Dinosaur kinds were probably represented aboard the ark as juveniles. Some of these families of great reptiles that came off of Noah's Ark would have gone extinct in subsequent years due to the harsh climatic conditions, but others adapted or survived in remote tropical regions. As human civilization spread across the earth, men encountered these large reptiles and recorded their interactions. It became standard practice for ancient mapmakers to identify the unexplored regions at the periphery of their maps with the cryptic words, "Here be dragons." The word dragon appears 34 times in the authorized version of the scriptures. Notice the words of the psalmist. "You shall tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion, and the dragon shall you trample under feet." From the context, it is clearly speaking about a real creature that it would be impressive and intimidating to step on. Jeremiah 51:34 tells how the king of Babylon has swallowed me up.
I also read a Bible version. They actually changed the word dragon with jackal or something else. In some translation, they actually changed the word dragon. It's crazy.
Like a dragon, which brings to mind the way many carnivorous reptiles gulp their prey whole. Both dragons of the sea, Psalm 74:13, and field, Isaiah 43:20, are mentioned. The Bible even alludes to the vocalization of the dragon. In Micah 1:8, "I will make a wailing like the dragons." The fact that dragons were powerful, frightening creatures is demonstrated by the book of Revelation likening Satan himself to a great red dragon. Revelation 12:9. World Book Encyclopedia states, "The dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles which existed long before man is supposed to have appeared on the earth. Dragons were generally evil and destructive. Every country had them in its mythology." The truth is that the fathers of modern paleontology used the terms dinosaur and dragon interchangeably for quite some time. Sir Richard Owen coined the term dinosaur in 1842. Before that, all scientists called the great reptiles dragons. Doubtless, some of the dragon stories that have been handed down over the generations have been exaggerated somewhat, but that does not mean they had no original basis in fact. Dinosaur skeletons have even been found that display some of the same peculiar dragon features that were once thought to be fanciful. In 2004, a fascinating dinosaur skull was discovered in South
Yeah, I don't buy the 2 small arms.
Dakota. Because of its dragon-like head, horns, and teeth, the new species was dubbed Dracorex hogwartsia. The dinosaur's skull mixes spiky horns, bumps, and a long muzzle. As you peruse the exhibit hall at Genesis Park, you will see some clear dinosaurian depictions made by ancient artists. Dinosaur iconography from painting, carvings, tapestry work, figurines, and simple etchings attest to the fact that men in antiquity encountered living dinosaurs. But there are also many credible written reports that come down to us from sober historians, accounts of dragons and men. Dragon histories go back as far as the ancient Gilgamesh epic, a Sumerian story written about 2000 BC. After Alexander the Great invaded India, he brought back reports of seeing a great hissing dragon living in a cave. Later Greek rulers supposedly captured dragons in Ethiopia and brought them back alive. The Chinese have the oldest intact civilization. Their stories of dragons and some of their ornamental pictures of dragons are remarkably like dinosaurs. Marco Polo wrote of his travels to the province of Karajan and reported on huge serpents, which at the forepart have 2 short legs, each with 3 claws, and large jaws. Books even tell of Chinese families raising dragons to use their blood for medicines and highly prizing their eggs. It is interesting that the 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac are all animals, 11 of which are still seen today. But is the 12th, the dragon, merely a legend, or is it based on a real animal, the dinosaur? It doesn't seem logical that the ancient Chinese, when constructing their zodiac, would include one mythical animal with 11 real animals. The interpretation of dinosaurs as dragons goes back more than 2,000 years in Chinese culture. They were regarded as sacred, as a symbol of power. China's oldest known dragon depiction is a curious discovery found at the ancient Jishuipo cemetery ruins along the Yellow River in Henan province. There, 3 artistic dragons, along with tigers and other animals, composed entirely of white shells, were placed alongside human remains. The Jishuipo site dates back several thousand years, yet the dragons shown are surprisingly like modern renditions. This shows the dragon concept did not slowly develop through Chinese history from a simplistic, primitive, mythological form. This is evidence that they were modeled after living creatures. St. John of Damascus, an
Get with the program. Myths are actually reality.
Eastern monk who lived in the 8th century, wrote a sober account of dragons, insisting that they are mere reptiles and did not have magical powers. He quoted the Roman historian Dio, who chronicled the Roman Empire in the 2nd century. It seems that when Regulus, a Roman consul, fought against Carthage, a dragon suddenly crept up and settled behind the wall of the Roman army. The Romans killed it, skinned it, and sent the hide to the Roman Senate. Dio claimed the hide was measured by order of the Senate and found to be 120 feet long. It is unlikely that either Dio or the pious St. John would support an outright fabrication involving a Roman consul and the Senate. One of the most popular stories in medieval Europe was the legend of St. George slaying a dragon.
Yeah, they wouldn't like fabricate it like with this level of documentation of, high-ranking officials. And they're like writing mythology on it. Like, come on, bro.
Originating in the region of Libya and spread by the Crusaders, the story very likely had some basis in fact. According to the legend, a frightful dragon resided in a swamp and lake near a small fiefdom. In an effort to appease the dragon and preserve their city, the inhabitants fed it 2 sheep every day. When they ran out of sheep, the people began to offer their children, chosen by lot. On one day, it happened that the lot fell on the king's daughter, and so the princess was tied out at the lakeshore to await the venomous dragon. Just then, the knight St. George chanced to ride past that lake. The princess, trembling, tried to warn George to leave, but he vowed to remain and face the hideous reptile. As the dragon appeared, George charged it on horseback and overcame it with his lance.
Damn, that's kind of badass. I don't know if the story is actually true, but I 100% like believe like Saint George like slayed the dragon. Maybe mythology is somewhat embellished, but I don't. But there's like thousands of sculptures like say that Saint George actually slayed this dragon.
Quite apart from such popular legends, dragons were described in reputable zoological treatises.
And I 100% believe that human beings would like actually feed their own children to dragons. Like, that makes logical sense too.
Published during the Middle Ages. For example, the great Swiss naturalist and medical doctor Conrad Gessner published a 4-volume encyclopedia from 1516 to 1565 entitled Historiae Animalium. He mentioned dragons as very rare but still living creatures. Ulysses Aldrovandus is considered by many to be the father of modern natural history. He traveled extensively, collected thousands of animals and plants, and created the first ever natural history museum. His impressive collections are today housed in a special wing at the Bologna University, where they attest to his scholarship. This background should give credence to the following incident that Aldrovandus personally reported concerning a dragon. The dragon was first seen on May 13, 1572, hissing like a snake. He had been hiding on the small estate of Master Petronius near Dosius in a place called Malinolta. At 5 p.m., he was caught on a public highway by a herdsman named Baptista of Camaldulus, near the hedge of a private farm, a mile from the remote city outskirts of Bologna. Baptista was following his ox cart home when he noticed the oxen suddenly come to a stop. He kicked them and shouted at them, but they refused to move and went down on their knees rather than move forward. At this point, the herdsman noticed a hissing sound and was startled to see this strange little dragon ahead of him. Trembling, he struck it on the head with his rod and killed it.
That's it, bro. Like, the way like history tells the dragons were super killable, like.
Aldrovandus identified it as a reptile, the first of this type that he had seen. The strange creature seemed to be completely harmless. Aldrovandus surmised that the dragon was a juvenile, judging by the incompletely developed claws and teeth. Aldrovandus mounted the specimen and displayed it for some time. It is regrettable that, while many of his museum mounts nicely survived, the dragon mount has disappeared.
Yeah, wonder why, like, I think the mainstream took it.
An old Assiniboine Indian story tells of a war party that traveled a long distance to unfamiliar lands and saw some large lizards. The warriors held a council and discussed what they knew about those strange creatures. They decided that those big lizards were bad medicine and should be left alone.
I think that's like the 100% right answer. Just leave them alone, bro. Like.
However, one warrior who wanted more war honors said that he was not afraid of those animals and would kill one.
Of course, like human beings would like try to fuck shit up.
He took his lance and charged one of the large lizard-type animals and tried to kill it. But he had trouble sticking his lance in the creature's hide, and during the battle, he himself was killed and eaten.
Yeah, he deserved to be killed, bro. Like.
The credible Jewish historian Josephus told of small flying reptiles that lived in ancient Egypt and Arabia, and described how the predatory ibis bird halted their invasion into Egypt, for which service the Egyptians revered the ibis. The well-respected Greek researcher Herodotus wrote, "There is a place in Arabia, situated very near the city of Buto, to which I went, on hearing of some winged serpents. And when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of the water snake, but he has wings without feathers and is like as possible to the wings of a bat. In his third volume, Herodotus goes on to tell how these animals could sometimes be found in the Arabian spice groves. He describes their size, coloration, and reproduction. It seems flying serpents were infamous for hanging in frankincense trees. When workers wanted to gather the tree's incense, they would employ putrid smoke to drive the flying reptiles away. Aristotle and several other ancient authors also referenced these flying serpents. Reliable witness reports of flying dragons in Europe were written in the 1600s. Marie Trevelyan records, the woods around Penlyn Castle, Glamorgan, had the reputation of being frequented by winged serpents, and these were the terror of old and young alike. An aged inhabitant of Penlyn, who died a few years ago, said that in his boyhood, the winged serpents were described as very beautiful. They were coiled when in repose, and looked as if they were covered with jewels of all sorts. Some of them had crests sparkling with all the colors of the rainbow. When disturbed, they glided swiftly, sparkling all over, to their hiding places. The popular 17th century writer Athanasius Kircher wrote how the nobleman Christopher Sheriram, prefect of the entire territory, witnessed a phenomenon written in his own words. On a warm night in 1619, while contemplating the serenity of the heavens, I saw a shining dragon of great size in front of Mount Pilatus, coming from the opposite side of the lake, moving rapidly in an agitated way, seen flying across. It was of a large size, with a long tail, a long neck, a reptile's head, and ferocious gaping jaws. As it flew, it was like iron
Bro, it will be amazing to see this creatures at night, especially if it's glowing.
struck in a forge when pressed together that scatters sparks. At first I thought it was a meteor from what I saw, but after I diligently observed it alone, I understood it was indeed a dragon from the motion of the limbs of the entire body. The 16th century Italian explorer Pigafetta, in a report of the Kingdom of Congo, described iridescent flying dragons from the province of Bimba. There are also certain other creatures which, being as big as rams, have wings like dragons, with long tails and long chaps and diverse rows of teeth, and feed upon raw flesh. Their color is blue and green, their skin painted like scales, and they have 2 feet but no more. The pagan Negroes used to worship them as gods, and to this day you may see diverse of them that are kept for a marvel. And because they are very rare, the chief lords there curiously preserve them, and suffer the people to worship them, which tendeth greatly to their profits by reason of the gifts and oblations which the people offer unto them. In medieval times, the Scandinavians described swimming dragons, and the Vikings placed carved dragons on the front of their ships to scare off the sea monsters. Hans Egede, missionary to Greenland, was known to keep a meticulous recording of natural observations. He documented a sea monster which he saw off the coast in 1734. A well-publicized serpent-like sea monster sighting was made by the crew and officers of HMS Daedalus in August of 1848. The creature they saw measured approximately 60 feet long and sported a mane on its head. Numerous other such stories have been recorded from the great age of sailing ships from 1500 to 1900 AD, when men traversed the ocean without the noise of modern powered vessels. 2 swimming dragons are mentioned by name in Scripture. First, there is the sea monster called Rahab. Then there is the ferocious Leviathan. Psalm 104, 25-26 says, "So is this great and wide sea, wherein are things creeping innumerable, both small and great beasts. There go the ships. There is that Leviathan, whom thou hast made to play therein." Psalm 148:7 instructs, "Praise the Lord from the earth, ye dragons, and all deeps."
Now actually I want to see one like I'm amped up. Like I want to see one like.
These awe-inspiring reptiles should cause us to contemplate the power of our great Creator and give Him glory. The evidence is compelling that some of the great reptiles survived near inhabited areas and were known as dragons. Evolutionary zoologist Desmond Morris conceded, "In the world of fantastic animals, the dragon is unique. It is as though there was once a whole family of different dragon species that really existed before they mysteriously became extinct. Indeed, as recently as the 17th century, scholars wrote of dragons as though they were scientific fact, their anatomy and natural history being recorded in painstaking detail." By the 19th century, dragons had largely been wiped out by expanding civilizations. Men viewed them as a threat and hunted them down, both to safeguard new lands for settlement and to prove their dominance.
Yeah, I 100% believe that would happen. Like, man actually wiped them out of it, like existence.
The changing ecosystems and rise of colonial empires drove many species, including most of the great reptiles, into extinction. And so ended the historical age of dragons and men.
I also want to like show this video. Like this video is crazy, bro. Like This is my lunch break.
When I told you that we would be coming back, today, we are going to wake people up and show the world that this place that we all live is not at all what we have all been told. Are you ready? Here we go. Here we have the melted structure that we covered, where there are arches, bridges, and the rest. Very clear melting all over the place. So as we zoom out here, we are going to see a massive head. Of course, in my opinion, a dragon. Right here, you can very clearly see its jaw with all of its teeth. Zooming out even more, you can see the size
Yo. Damn, it looks like a dragon. If this is true, bro, like...
of this thing with its wings and everything. And once you see this, you will never unsee it ever again while looking at the map of the USA. Today, we are going to be showing a lot of places that when looking at a map again, this world will never look the same. We are going to show that this place that we live, it's so much more interesting than what we've been told. When we zoom back in on the head, where you can see its molars very clearly here, where the jawline continues, and you of course have the incisors, exactly like we see in all animals today. This is a jawline, 100%. Where we zoom in even more, and you can see for yourself what this location is now called.
Yo, they have actually a name also, like... The place is called Black Dragon. Why, bro? Like... Things are actually fishy, bro, like...
Black Dragon Canyon. Couldn't get any clearer. First, I want to show you these locations' names. We have the Moab, with petrified dunes. Of course we do. Then we have more arches that we are told are naturally occurring. And we've shown this in episode 79, where they just say it randomly happened from some wind blowing the sand because they say it was a hot, dry climate for 150 million years. It's complete nonsense. Delicate arch, looking incredible. We are also given the catacomb rocks, which I would love to know what is underneath or inside of that location. Where at this point, I think I can take a guess. We've seen a ton of things on catacombs. We have a few more arches, and then you zoom out, and you see the size of this thing. It is massive, with this hole right here in this location, where in my opinion, this is where it was killed, where it now creates a mountain range, and a location that I personally will never be able to unsee, showing us that there is still so much more to learn about where we are, and things that have been hiding right in front of our faces for so long, until now. When we zoom in on this location, you are going to see it just has scales all over it, perfect 90-degree angles, over and over and over, where we are told from back in episode 79, this kind of stuff just happened back in the Triassic ages, from 200 million years ago. We had the wind just blowing the right way back then. No. And this dragon, of course, has the name Black Dragon Canyon, right in the mouth, and a highway, Route 70, in our advanced
They couldn't get it more obvious if the place is named like Black Dragon.
civilization just cruising right through its head for years, and nobody said anything. Nobody knew. Where we know what a tooth looks like. We don't need somebody to tell us. And those are massive teeth, 100%, with mystery arch off to the right. And we also know that there are 12 Chinese zodiac signs. We have the rat, the ox, the tiger, the rabbit, the dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. We have 11 things, 11 real animals. And then there is one that is a myth, or are all 12 very real? It's an interesting time to expose this because we are, of course, right in the middle of the year of the dragon, and we're just getting started today. Welcome to episode 83 of my lunch break. I hope you're all having a great day, and if you're new, welcome. Click track, I'd Rick ding you. About dragons. We've seen them in the movies or on TV shows. We've heard of them in books and the rest. We also have a copy of a dictionary where you look up the word dragon and it says that they are now very rare. A huge serpent, a fabulous animal, now rare. It's very interesting. Where we have also heard of Leviathan, a sea dragon with limbs, fire-breathing abilities, and impenetrable scales. Now this is mentioned multiple times in the Bible, where God left only one alive, so that it couldn't destroy the rest of creation. And the word dragon occurs 21 times in the Old Testament. This is all before the word dinosaur was ever invented. Nobody was saying there were dinosaurs until 1842, when Sir Richard Owen just made it up, the exact time period that we've all been talking about on this channel throughout the first 83 episodes, where he just made up the name, and then a few years later they find one for the first time. And regardless of scripture, regardless of signs from China, where we can all take that research and keep it if we'd like, we can also see for ourselves. We can see what is still here, which we are going to continue to do today. We also know that the griffin, the symbol of Tartaria, shown on their flags, is not a dragon, but they are very similar.
Yeah, there's like sculptures of griffins like almost everywhere in the world. It's also like indication of Tartaria in the old world. Like griffins also existed.
Where we know that if one was here, who knows what else was here, where we all live today. How big were things in the past? The significance of this is massive. It would mean that the land layout that we are all shown, this little ball, is way too small for a creature this size. So how much more land is there? There's no way that this massive creature could be flying around in our little cage that we're all shown, which is kind of what we are all dealing with right now, in my opinion, a little cage. in a little season. And we all know that if I'm bringing up the possibility of dragons, then I'm not just going to show you one. We aren't even close to done. So let's go find another one and go to northern Africa, where the head, the mouth, is right next to Morocco. You can see the head right here with its mouth open, exactly like we saw in Utah, with its wings right here going to its body.
And how does this dude actually finds this?
Personally, I will never be able to look at Utah or Morocco the same ever again. So I've taken all the borders out and all the names off the map so we can just look at this thing. Imagine this flying around and how big things used to be. So we have this one in Utah, where its head alone is 66.65 miles in length and about 182 miles in length overall. And this one in Africa is even bigger, with its head alone being 308 miles in length. The head by itself is nearly double the size of the entire body of the one in Utah. Where I have to be honest, I feel like this episode may be the most incredible video to this point. Finding massive dragons within our land layout, which would show the land that we've all been living on for all of our lives, has massive dragons embedded into it. Dragons that have been here all along, and we just couldn't see them until we finally opened our minds and were finally able to think for ourselves, finally able to process information without simply dismissing it, because we were never told about it by our teachers. Our Channel 4 just hasn't mentioned it yet. And if they haven't mentioned it, it could never be true. This thought process is done. We are moving on. It's time to realize what's going on and where we all are and what we're all doing here. This proves to me that there are other things that are here in this place that we all live that are definitely going to be revealed to us the further that we go. Because once you can see and have an open mind and have thousands of us and one day millions all working together, we are going to find it all, just like we are today, just like we're about to do right now. Did you think that was the only two dragons? No. I saved the best for last. But first, let's take a minute and thank all of our badge members, all of our Patreons, and every going on here that is so much different than just cowboys and Indians, cavemen, and people riding around on horses and wagons. For thousands of years, the narrative that we are all told from day one is controlled. And we know this. It's not the full truth. In fact, it is very far from it. It is a narrative that keeps your mind inside of a box and does not allow you to see things outside of it. Where something massive has happened here, where we all live today. And we are just getting started on this channel. So are you ready? Here we go. We have shown two dragons today that
There's
are
like a lot of murals, sculptures, like different creatures, like not just dragons, so like different creatures that we can hardly comprehend. And these things actually existed. Like look at this, bro. Like, looks like a dog's head. It's crazy.
where we all live today. And we are just getting started on this channel, playing on our land, and are definitely no longer alive. Where this one that I'm about to show is a massive dragon, in my opinion, that may still be alive. Where we now know that this place that we all live today is much more in depth than what we have been told. Where we know that the history that we've all been told is complete nonsense all over the world. Where we also know that alligators have the capability to enter a state of dormancy called brumation during the winters to survive cold environments, becoming dormant below 55 degrees, keeping their nose out of the water just to breathe. Again, the dragon is the only one that is not real. Now, is this true? Why would one not be real? Are you 100% sure that it's not real? Are you 100% sure it's not still here today in a dormant state? Still here in our ocean.
Yo, this shit looks like a Godzilla, bro. Like, if this is real, is this a stretch? Or like, bro, this shit looks huge.
Still here, and possibly going to wake up if the temperature reaches above 55 degrees. A massive dragon, in my opinion, without a doubt, a massive head, with its nose out of the water, exactly like we see with the alligators, where it looks like we have 16 degrees to work with. So let's zoom in on this thing's head and see exactly what's going on at its nose, where we are told that we have islands, places that we cannot drop the guy down and see what's going on. Islands with the name Vindication Island, where they're coloring around it and not hiding anything at all. Give me a break. What is going on at this so-called Bristol Island? They clearly got their crayons out and colored in around this creature's nose. We are not able to see where it's still breathing and are just told that these are islands that you, of course, cannot put the guy down on. Now again, a dragon, a snake, whatever it is, a creature of this size, where its head alone is over 1,100 miles long.
It makes you wonder, like, Godzilla and all these movies, like, how is this predictive programming, like, and they're like bases actually built around this, you know, watching this creature while in hibernation.
This creature would never fit on a tiny ball, like we are all told, where this is proving, in my opinion, that there is a lot more land.
Yeah, the ball doesn't make sense, bro.
Whether you believe that we are on a ball or not, whether you think that this place is flat or not, the ball or the plane that we've all been shown would have to be much larger. The map that we are shown is simply not the full map. It would have to extend much further out. This is clearly a head. There is zero doubt about it, and it's been here all along, our entire lives, and we've never seen it before, until now, because we're asking questions. With its head coming out of the water to breathe, exactly like the alligator does. And it makes perfect sense, since this is the location where there is nothing, just a mass amount of water and zero land. And this is the reason that there are so many bases and stations set up right here next to it. Researching this dragon, is this the true reason for the Antarctic Treaty? Where if we go to polarconnection.org, we will see where figure 2 says the Antarctic with the area south of 60 degrees south latitude indicated in red. This is the location that we cannot go. You can't just rent a boat and go down there, where you can see there is another boundary, the CCAMLR boundary, which literally lines up perfectly with this dragon's head. The head is in the middle of these two circles. In fact, they even end the CCAMLR boundary line right after this dragon's head. So how much clearer could this get? This is unbelievable. And you can even see that right next to this head, it looks like this might be an arm and a hand. These are now locations, places on our map that I'm guessing we will never be able to look at again the same. And they open so many doors for us. Where did these dragons come from? Is there more land? Are there more dragons on our land layout that we just haven't found yet? Are there more dragons out there past the 60th degree parallel? What other species are still out there waiting to be discovered? How many dragons were there? There are so many questions, but today I feel like we have proved factual information.
It's a shame we'll never find out about the true history of this world because the mainstream always hiding it. Like, we'll never find out.
Proving that massive dragons existed and possibly still do, with bases and stations circling around it, with it being blocked off from all of us. And not just one, but multiple dragons right here on our map, where these dragons would never be able to live on such a small map, proving that our true map has to be much bigger. And
Yeah, like, these are the inscriptions of the medieval time. Like, what the fuck actually happened during that time?
possibly has other creatures living in outer space, where we live in the inner space, where it seems that we should all hope that the temperature in this location, just below South America, stays below 55 degrees, or else something massive may just be waking up from its sleep. And when we continue to look, we will continue to find massive dragons all over this place that we all live, just like we find covering half of the United States of America, where we all might have to start looking at Florida a little different from now on. Is that?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So, like, dragons are real. There's not a mythology. They're not mythology. Like, dragons are 100% real. Like, every time you hear the word dinosaur, I actually think it's dragons. So, that's about it, bro.